Berlin, April 1945. The city was a fractured shell of its former self. Sirens pierced the smoke-choked sky as Allied bombers screamed overhead, dropping destruction with calculated precision. Flames licked the horizon, and the streets below were a chaotic tapestry of panic, shouting, and desperate flight. Yet beneath this crumbling world, in the subterranean veins of Berlin, a strange, suffocating calm had settled. Inside the Führer's bunker, the world above seemed to vanish. The walls were thick, cold, and unyielding, muffling the chaos beyond. The hum of ventilation systems was almost hypnotic, a monotonous rhythm that kept fear at bay, or perhaps amplified it. Here, in these shadowed corridors, a select group of women moved quietly, their presence almost invisible but deeply entwined with history's most terrifying chapter. They were secretaries, aides, nurses, names most people would never utter, faces most would never recognize. Their hands typed messages that could shift the course of battles. Their eyes watched leaders plotting strategies that would cost millions of lives. Their ears overheard words meant to be whispered only among the most powerful men in Nazi Germany. And yet they were trapped in this underground labyrinth, living day after day under the weight of an ideology that demanded loyalty and punished dissent. Who were these women? What did they witness in the cold, echoing halls where Hitler paced, Goebbels ranted, and the world above burned? Some were idealists, believing in the grand illusion of the Third Reich. Some were terrified and compliant, their minds screaming for escape that could never come. And some, quietly and invisibly, began to question, to resist, or to record what others would rather forget. The bunker itself was more than a workplace. It was a cage. Its steel-reinforced walls were meant to protect, but in reality they confined. Every hallway was lined with whispers of fear, every room a stage for both devotion and betrayal. Survival here was not merely about obeying orders. It was about navigating a treacherous moral maze where a single misstep could mean death. Footsteps echoed on concrete floors. The faint scratch of a pen against paper, the low murmur of a secret conversation. These were the sounds of life persisting amid encroaching doom. And as the bombs fell above, and the distant cries of a city in flames reached even the deepest recesses of the bunker, a chilling question lingered in the minds of those who worked below. How far would you go to survive when survival itself demanded complicity and horror? This was the hidden world of the women inside Hitler's bunker, a place where every glance, every word, and every decision carried weight beyond imagination. What they saw, what they endured, and what they carried out into the world above would remain largely untold for decades. Yet as we peel back the layers of secrecy, one thing becomes clear. The shadows of the bunker were not merely a shelter, they were a crucible of moral conflict, fear and unspoken terror. And in that darkness, the first flickers of a story that the world would scarcely believe were already taking shape, waiting for the day they could finally be told. Beneath the shattered streets of Berlin, life in the Führer's bunker carried a rhythm all its own, a rhythm of fear, duty, and an almost hypnotic monotony. Above, the city crumbled under relentless Allied bombardment. But below, time seemed to stretch, every hour measured not by the sun, but by the ticking of clocks, the shuffle of papers, and the whispered commands of men who believed the world belonged to them. The bunker's hierarchy was rigid and unyielding. Hitler paced his private quarters like a caged predator, his fury and delusion spilling into meetings where generals and aides awaited his next order with a mixture of terror and awe. Goebbels plotted propaganda campaigns even as the bombs shook the earth above, while other members of the inner circle moved like ghosts through the concrete maze, their eyes reflecting both exhaustion and fanaticism. For those outside this circle, the women who served as secretaries, typists, nurses, and messengers, their proximity to history's pulse was both a privilege and a curse. Every day brought tasks that seemed mundane on the surface, but carried the weight of consequence. Typists transcribed Hitler's dictations, unaware if a single misplaced word might alter the fate of thousands. Nurses tended to the sick and injured within the bunker, their hands steady while their hearts quivered, knowing that death was never far. Messengers ran through the labyrinthine corridors, clutching coded documents that could determine the outcome of battles, every step echoing in the silence like a warning. The women's experiences were as varied as they were harrowing. Some idolized the Führer, caught in the intoxicating pull of power and ideology. They wore loyalty like armor, masking fear with blind devotion. Others endured in quiet resentment, each glance at the horrors unfolding above and below, a dagger of moral conflict. A typist might deliver Hitler's commands with a trembling hand, while privately keeping a hidden diary of the atrocities she witnessed. A nurse could soothe a wounded soldier one moment, and in the next be struck by the weight of complicity for tending to men who executed unspeakable acts. The tension in the bunker was constant and suffocating. Whispered conversations carried from room to room, a secret language of fear and suspicion. Notes were passed discreetly. Coded messages were scribbled on scraps of paper that might vanish with the sweep of a careless hand. Outside, the Allied bombs shook the earth, but inside, the threat was psychological. Every look, every footstep, every word could mark someone for punishment or worse. Even the smallest tasks were shadowed by terror. Delivering a message could feel like walking a tightrope over a pit of fire. Typing a letter meant balancing efficiency with discretion, ensuring that secrets remained intact while navigating a web of paranoia. Nurses moved like specters, unseen but crucial, carrying both compassion and dread in equal measure. Life in the bunker was a constant dance with fear, a paradox where the mundane coexisted with the unimaginable. Each woman carried her own story, some stories of loyalty, some of quiet defiance, some of moral surrender. And together they created a tapestry of tension, intrigue, and humanity in the darkest of places. The closer they were to power, the deeper they were entangled in a world that offered no escape, only survival. And yet, beneath this suffocating routine, cracks were forming. Small moments of hesitation, secret glances, and whispered doubts hinted that even in the bunker's shadows, the human spirit, fearful, defiant, and fragile, was still very much alive. The bunker's corridors were silent, save for the occasional scrape of shoes against concrete or the low murmur of conversation. Yet beneath this stillness, tension thrummed like a living thing. For the women who served there, each day brought encounters that etched fear and moral conflict into their very souls. They were witnesses, not just to history, but to the unfolding madness of a man whose paranoia had metastasized into cruelty. Hitler's presence was both commanding and suffocating. In meetings with his generals, he ranted and raved, his voice sharp and brittle, demanding loyalty, obedience, and results that often defied logic. Women typed furiously as his words spilled onto pages, sometimes horrified by the orders they carried, strategies that would send thousands of soldiers to their deaths, plans that could destroy entire neighborhoods. Some women pressed their hands to their mouths, hiding gasps, while others stiffened, knowing that showing emotion could mark them as weak, or worse, disloyal. Goebbels, too, demonstrated a cold, calculating cruelty. Propaganda meetings were tense affairs where truth and manipulation blurred. Women observed him with unease, noting how easily fear could be wielded as a weapon. They carried his directives from office to office, walking the tightrope between obedience and the gnawing knowledge that what they did contributed to horrors unfolding both inside and outside the bunker. Every day brought small but devastating reminders of the psychological toll. A nurse tending a wounded soldier could witness a man dying from wounds sustained while following orders dictated by the very leader she served. A secretary might pass along a document that condemned an entire community to destruction, then retreat to a quiet corner to breathe through the weight of complicity. Their hands moved automatically, but their minds raced, questioning, judging, and fearing the consequences of any deviation from the rules. The women also observed the unraveling of Hitler's mind. Paranoia shadowed every gesture, every glance. He distrusted even his closest aides, scrutinizing every word as if a betrayal could be hidden in the smallest inflection. Meetings became exercises in tension and fear, where generals dared not speak unless spoken to, and women were forced to witness a spectacle of control and intimidation that chilled them to the bone. Whispers traveled through the corridors, rumors of approaching Soviet forces, of defeats being suffered above, of the city outside burning. The women's anxiety was compounded by the claustrophobic environment. Trapped below ground, with the world collapsing around them, they faced a moral and physical imprisonment. Some wrote secret notes chronicling the madness, while others silently prayed that the chaos above might pass them by. And yet, even in this suffocating darkness, moments of stark clarity emerged. Each woman confronted a choice: to comply and survive, to resist quietly and risk death, or to shut down emotionally and protect herself by detachment. Their eyes saw the worst of humanity. Their ears heard plans and rhetoric steeped in hatred, and their hearts struggled with the unbearable knowledge that their presence, their labor, even their silence, made them complicit in crimes that would echo far beyond the walls of the bunker. As Berlin's final days approached, the inevitability of collapse became undeniable. The bombs shook the earth. The screams of the city penetrated the thick walls, and the once commanding figures of authority frayed under pressure. The women were trapped in the eye of history's storm, witnesses to a world falling apart, carrying secrets that the outside world would scarcely comprehend. In that suffocating darkness, they realized that survival was no longer just about following orders. It was about navigating a moral minefield where every decision could be the difference between life, death, and the weight of history itself. Even in the claustrophobic darkness of the bunker, not all women surrendered entirely to fear or obedience. Some found ways to resist, subtle and secretive, their courage hidden beneath the veneer of compliance. A single glance could carry a message. A folded scrap of paper might bear a hidden truth. And the smallest act of defiance became an act of survival for the soul, if not the body. One secretary carefully copied orders and meetings into a hidden diary, encoding names and dates so that if the war ended, and it would, someone, somewhere, might understand the machinery of evil she had witnessed firsthand. A nurse smuggled small packages to prisoners detained nearby, risking beatings or execution, knowing full well that a single mistake would cost her life. Another aide passed along whispered warnings, delivering them through the labyrinthine corridors of the bunker, careful that no one traced her movements. Every day was a delicate dance between daring and discretion. The stakes could not have been higher. Hitler's paranoia permeated the air like a living thing, ready to pounce on any perceived disloyalty. Guards patrolled constantly, eyes trained to detect hesitation, suspicion, or hesitation in the women's movements. A folded note left in the wrong place, a glance held too long, a whispered conversation overheard. Any of these could result in interrogation, imprisonment, or death. Yet despite the danger, small acts of courage persisted, and the women found a strange, dangerous empowerment in taking them. The bunker, designed to enforce obedience and isolate the inner circle from reality, could not entirely crush the human spirit. In the shadows, tiny alliances formed, glances that acknowledged understanding, shared nods over a message delivered correctly, moments where defiance passed silently from one woman to another. Even amidst fear, a quiet rebellion flickered, a testament to resilience when the world seemed intent on stamping out conscience and courage. These hidden acts of resistance came with an emotional cost. Every covert operation carried the weight of potential exposure. Every act of compassion or defiance a gamble against the bunker's ruthless order. The women lived constantly on edge, navigating the conflicting demands of loyalty, self-preservation, and morality. Each day was a test, and every choice could be fatal. In the oppressive silence of the underground halls, the tension was palpable. The women were aware that history might never know their names or deeds, yet they persisted. Their courage was quiet, invisible to those above, yet it shaped the moral contours of the bunker in ways the inner circle could never recognize. Even in the shadow of the Third Reich's final days, acts of defiance, small, secret, and dangerous, remained a testament to human resilience and conscience. In a world dominated by fear, these women discovered that survival was not simply about obeying orders or hiding in silence. True survival required daring, ingenuity, and the willingness to risk everything for what was right, even when the walls themselves seemed to conspire against them. April 1945. The bunker's walls seemed to close in as Hitler's final days unfolded in a terrifying blend of delusion and desperation. Above ground, Berlin was a city in ruins, but below, in the shadowed corridors of the Führer's subterranean fortress, a different kind of chaos consumed those trapped within. Orders were shouted, scribbled, and sometimes ignored entirely as Hitler's mind unraveled. Consumed by paranoia and defeat, women who had once moved through the bunker with cautious obedience now navigated an atmosphere thick with panic. The dictator's tirades had grown more frenzied, filled with blame, despair, and impossibly convoluted strategies to repel the inevitable Allied advance. Typists transcribed these rants with shaking hands. Nurses and aides moved quickly to deliver messages or tend to the sick, and everyone felt the weight of imminent collapse pressing against their chests like a living thing. In the darkness, the horrors of proximity became impossible to ignore. The women witnessed suicides within the inner circle, loyal men and women choosing death over capture. Goebbels and his family, once symbols of unwavering fanaticism, ended their lives in the bunker, leaving silence and shock in their wake. These events were not just headlines in history. They were lived trauma, etched into memory, impossible to erase. Panic rippled through the corridors. Some women froze, paralyzed by the magnitude of events and the moral gravity of being so close to evil. Others acted on instinct, running messages, securing documents, or simply seeking safety wherever it might be found. Survival instincts overrode fear of punishment. The bunker, once a place of rigid order, now teetered on the edge of chaos, reflecting the collapse of the regime itself. The moral weight of complicity became unbearable. Some women who had once believed in the ideology recoiled at the destruction and death surrounding them, realizing that their daily actions, typing messages, delivering orders, witnessing atrocities, had made them part of the machinery of evil. Others had quietly resisted, and their courage now offered a small but meaningful distinction, though survival had demanded sacrifices that would haunt them forever. Every woman emerged from those days irrevocably changed, their innocence stripped, their conscience scarred by the impossible truths they had seen. Even in the chaos, practical concerns persisted. Escape routes were debated in whispers. Hidden staircases and tunnels explored with caution, every decision a gamble with life itself. The women understood that the moment of liberation or capture was imminent, and yet there was no relief in sight, only the terrifying uncertainty of what awaited beyond the bunker walls. Amidst despair and fear, fleeting moments of humanity appeared, a whispered reassurance to a colleague, a shared glance that acknowledged horror without words. A brief act of kindness or courage. These were the fragile threads holding them together as the world crumbled above and around them. And then, the unthinkable became reality. Hitler's death marked the symbolic and literal end of the bunker's authority, leaving a vacuum filled with panic, confusion, and the chaotic rush to survive. The women, some complicit, some horrified, all profoundly changed, faced a future they could scarcely imagine, a future shaped by fear, moral compromise, and the indelible experience of standing at the heart of history's most infamous final act. In those final hours, as the dust and rubble of Berlin mixed with the echoes of despair, The women of the bunker learned that survival was never guaranteed, that moral choices carried infinite weight, and that being so close to evil would mark them forever. The collapse was complete, but the echoes of their experiences would resonate for decades to come. The moment the Soviet forces breached Berlin, the bunker erupted into chaos. Women who had once moved carefully through shadowed corridors now found themselves in a desperate scramble for survival. Stairwells, hidden tunnels, and service exits became lifelines, though no path guaranteed safety. Every step carried the threat of discovery. Every corner might hide a soldier with lethal intent. Some fled in small groups, clutching what few possessions they could carry, slipping through rubble-strewn streets as the sounds of gunfire and shouting echoed above. Others remained, paralyzed by fear or indecision, watching the world above collapse, while the shadows below became their only refuge. The choice to stay or run was never simple. Every decision carried the weight of potential death and moral reckoning. Encounters with soldiers were tense, unpredictable, and terrifying. A Soviet patrol could appear suddenly, demanding identification or dragging someone away for interrogation. Women faced suspicion, anger, and hostility, sometimes for their association with the bunker, sometimes for no reason at all. Stories circulated quickly, of women executed for complicity, of others detained for days, subjected to harsh questioning about their knowledge of the regime's inner workings. Survival depended on quick thinking, convincing lies, or the ability to disappear into the chaos unnoticed. Even when they escaped physical danger, the psychological toll was immense. Survivors' guilt gnawed at them, a constant reminder of what they had witnessed and what they had done, or failed to do. Memories of shouting, orders, deaths, and whispered conversations haunted their nights. Shame and self-reproach became companions, mingling with relief and the fragile spark of hope that perhaps, somehow, they might continue living. Each woman grappled with the impossible task of reconciling survival with conscience. For some, the post-war world offered no comfort. Women who had been prominent within the bunker faced prosecution, interrogations, or public scrutiny. Others faded into obscurity, quietly reintegrating into society, their stories buried beneath the weight of history. Some vanished entirely, leaving only fragmented mentions in records or whispered accounts from those who knew them. The fate of each was uncertain, a reflection of the moral and practical chaos that had engulfed them. And yet, even in uncertainty, a thread of resilience persisted. The women who survived carried forward the lessons of the bunker, the fragility of morality under pressure, the corrosive power of fear, and the indelible imprint of history witnessed firsthand. They had stood at the heart of evil, faced the collapse of the regime, and emerged into a world that demanded both accountability and forgetting. The shadows of the bunker lingered long after its walls were sealed, haunting the memories of those who had lived through its darkness. Some would speak of it, some would never tell, and some would carry secrets that history might never fully understand. Their stories, a mixture of courage, fear, complicity, and endurance, became part of the hidden truth of the Third Reich, echoing in the lives they led beyond the ruins of Berlin. The bunker no longer existed. The concrete walls, the labyrinthine corridors, the hidden rooms that had witnessed fear, despair, and obedience, everything had been reduced to rubble or buried beneath the ruins of Berlin. And yet, the stories of those who had lived within it endured, carried silently in memory, in whispered recollections, and in the hidden acts of courage and complicity that had defined their existence in those final, terrifying days. The women who had served in Hitler's bunker left behind a legacy that history could scarcely capture. They were witnesses to the most intimate workings of a regime that had brought the world to the brink of catastrophe. Yet their names and faces were largely absent from the textbooks and documentaries that chronicled the Third Reich. Their experiences reveal the complex intersection of survival, morality, and human behavior under conditions of extreme duress. How does one act when every choice is constrained by fear, when the walls around you are not only physical but moral, enclosing you in a world where obedience can mean complicity and defiance can mean death? Some of these women were complicit in ways both small and significant, typing orders that resulted in mass executions, delivering messages that sealed fates, remaining silent as atrocities unfolded around them. Others resisted in quiet, almost invisible ways, documenting events, smuggling messages, aiding prisoners in secret. Every action, every decision carried weight. Even those who survived unscathed physically bore invisible scars. The psychological imprint of what they had seen and what they had been forced to endure. Their stories force us to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature. Fear can bind people to obedience. Authority can crush moral judgment. And yet, even in the darkness of tyranny, glimpses of courage, empathy, and defiance persist. The women of the bunker lived within this tension, navigating the fine line between survival and complicity. Their experiences challenge simplistic narratives of good and evil, revealing instead a world where every choice was measured against the impossible realities of the moment. Some vanished into history, their fates unknown, leaving only fragments of testimony behind. Some were prosecuted, judged for their proximity to power and their roles within the machinery of oppression. Others quietly reintegrated into post-war society, carrying with them memories that could never be spoken aloud, the weight of the bunker's secrets pressing on their hearts for decades. The choices they made, whether to comply, resist, or simply survive, offer a haunting reflection on the moral compromises that war and terror demand. And yet, even in obscurity, their stories resonate. They remind us that history is not only shaped by the powerful or the infamous, but also by those who exist in the shadows, whose voices may be silenced, but whose experiences reveal the human capacity for both complicity and courage. They force us to ask ourselves, how would we act under such pressure? What lines would we cross, and what moral courage could we summon when confronted with the machinery of evil? The bunker may be gone, but its echoes remain. The walls have crumbled, but the psychological architecture of fear, loyalty, and moral conflict persists in the memories of those who lived it. Even decades later, the truths these women carried remain shocking, a reminder of the fragility of conscience and the weight of history witnessed firsthand. Their legacy is not just in the events they observed, but in the questions they leave behind, the unanswerable, haunting reflections on human nature that continue to challenge, disturb, and engage us. As we peer into the past, we are confronted with a chilling paradox. The women of Hitler's bunker were ordinary in many ways, yet their circumstances forced them into extraordinary moral and psychological landscapes. They remind us that history is rarely black and white, that survival can demand compromises that haunt the soul, and that even in the darkest corners of human behavior, traces of courage and conscience can persist. In the end, the bunker's walls are silent, its rooms empty, and its secrets buried beneath the rubble of a defeated regime. But the stories of the women who worked within, of fear, complicity, courage, and survival, endure. They are a testament to the human capacity to navigate unimaginable terror, to witness history unfold in its most brutal form, and to carry the weight of truth into the world above. The bunker is gone, but the echoes remain, reminding us that some secrets are too profound to be erased, and some truths too shocking to be forgotten.